So it's officially official, Harry Potter is being rebooted into an HBO television series. New cast confirmed and everything. We've known this for a while, we've known that there was going to be some sort of remake. It's only natural given the current sequel, reboot, or remake status quo that we've got going on in Hollywood. But in terms of remakes, Harry Potter seems incredibly soon. We're 25 years removed from the release of the first film, and 14 from the final film. And throughout all these years, we've seen a number of different iterations of iconic characters and films, so it's only natural that at some point this would happen with Harry Potter. But the Harry Potter films were a massive, massive task that, in a lot of ways, is still going on today. Billions of dollars have been spent and made when it comes to theme parks, studio tours, merchandise, toys, games, and for the company to just want to do all this again feels very strange to me. In a lot of ways, this series of films was lightning in a bottle. You had a whole bunch of British legends sign on for many years while letting the younger and unknown actors take the spotlight, building a whole look and feel for magic and the wizarding world, and each of these films, while flawed, are still pretty great and hold up incredibly well. It's not like there's any noticeable dips in quality from movie to movie. The special effects and CGI still look good to great, except for the PS2 looking Harry in the first movie. So why remake and undergo such a massive task like the Harry Potter series?
Money.
We all want money.
The wizarding world itself has a whole ton of potential for money, except any cinematic ventures made outside of Harry Potter himself haven't been all that successful. There's the Fantastic Beasts films that have a wide variety of issues that I don't even want to get into right here, but to sum it up, there was supposed to be 5 movies, there's only 3 of them, for good reason. So instead of pivoting from the failure of Fantastic Beasts and delivering some other stories from this universe, like a Marauders series, a Hogwarts Founders story, or even a totally other story based on one of the other wizarding schools, we're getting Harry Potter. Again. Hogwarts Legacy was a monumental success, money-wise, so much so that apparently they're doing a separate TV show about it, which might actually be pretty interesting, but the team behind this new show is apparently so confident that they have the recipe for success in making a Harry Potter TV show that they can improve upon the original films. Now, some of you know this, some of you don't, but I will plainly admit it to all of you, I am a huge Harry Potter nerd. I have a whole collection of wands, I grew up reading each book, going to the midnight release of each new movie, I have Harry Potter tattoos, I watch these movies when I've had a bad day, when I'm building a new Harry Potter Lego, even when I've had a good day and I want to make it better. I am a full-blown millennial Harry Potter adult. So making this video about these films is a little strange to me, I won't lie, because in this video, I'm going to be going over the bad aspects of these stories, but also the good ones, why these stories work so well, things that this new series can possibly improve upon, and things that this series will undoubtedly fail at. I'll also be incorporating things from the books that were left out, even some stuff about the games, which would be cool to see in the show. I'll also be going over some things in this universe that don't make a whole lot of sense, like how Muggles don't ever see stuff from the wizarding world, but actually I guess this does make sense because all wizards use ExpressVPN. Guys, if you're not using a VPN in the big 2025, then consider this your sign to start using this one. Tired of seeing all those pesky ads from websites that you visited once and now you see them on like every site you go to? Yeah, that's because your data's leaked and it's probably being sold. Luckily for you, ExpressVPN encrypts and reroutes 100% of your network traffic through a secure server. This also means you're protected whenever you're using Wi-Fi from anywhere in public, or maybe even from your own home, that hackers could potentially be stealing your personal information from. Not to mention, ExpressVPN makes watching content from all around the world so much better and easier. Want to watch Lord of the Rings on Netflix in the US? Too bad, you can't, unless you have ExpressVPN. And it's not just Lord of the Rings, it's any number of different movies and TV shows across all streaming platforms. I personally just started catching up on all the episodes I've missed of Rick and Morty thanks to ExpressVPN. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/thrifty. That's expressvpn.com/thrifty. Thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. Now let's grab our Hogwarts letters, venture into the Chamber of Secrets, board the night bus, and drop our name into the Goblet of Fire as we go over Harry Potter years 1 through 4. Every franchise has a beginning. It's just that most beginnings don't have 2 titles. Or wait, do they? So to me, if you couldn't tell by my voice, I'm American. The first one has always been the Sorcerer's Stone to me, and honestly, for a good reason, because Philosophers just sounds like a nerd version of Sorcerer anyways.
Oh, you better be joking.
I'm kidding around, everybody. This is a British story, so the correct version of this title is most definitely Philosopher, but I'm going to be going by Sorcerer because that's just what I've always known it to be. So Harry Potter is your very typical hero's journey type of story. We've got an orphaned child whose life sucks, gets a literal invitation to go on an adventure, meets a mentor, friends, enemies, learns more about himself to defeat an enemy, and returns home a changed person. It's a story we've seen time and time again. It's a story we'll continue to see until the end of time because it's a tried and true story that gets results. But unlike a lot of recent hero's journey stories, this one isn't really dumbed down because its main audience is children. This is a 2.5-hour movie. They don't even step foot in Hogwarts until over 40 minutes into the film. And in terms of adaptations, this is one of the more faithful ones, especially when it comes to Harry Potter films. Quite honestly, to make this version a complete, one-to-one version of the book, you'd probably need another maybe hour. So how they're going to stretch this first book into 6 or 8 hours for a TV show, I have no idea. But Hogwarts itself is really introduced like a character of its own. And honestly, it kinda is. We're told about how the 3rd floor is completely forbidden, shown how the staircases change, and the boys get lost on the way to class because of just how massive Hogwarts really is. As this is the first movie, you really have to give credit to the art department and director Christopher Columbus, who doesn't get nearly enough credit for what he brought to the franchise. Everything that we know of Hogwarts and really the wizarding world itself was all laid out in this movie, and of course, there's stuff that changes from movie to movie, like the wands and the location of Hagrid's hut, and you kinda just have to go with it, but stuff like Hogwarts, the wardrobe, the classrooms, and the general look of everything, both inside of Hogwarts and outside, largely stays the same across the movies, and into the theme parks and the toys that we still see today. There are a few missing scenes and aspects from the first book that the show could definitely improve on. One of the biggest characters left out of all the films in general is Peeves the Poltergeist. Peeves flies around, giving everybody, but especially first years, a whole lot of trouble. He's a comedic relief character that's more so just around to be a nuisance, but over the course of all the books, he has a tiny bit of character development, and he's overall just here to add more to the world. But Peeves will probably be a highlighted character in this reboot to really emphasize how they're adding in more stuff from the books that weren't in the original films. Mrs. Fig is another semi-important character who was eventually introduced in the later films, but a big trend in these movies was introducing stuff when it would be important to the story and just kind of pretending it's been there the whole time. For example, in this movie, I'd say there's probably 3 key scenes missing: the midnight duel, delivering Norbert to Charlie, and the final potions obstacle to get to the Sorcerer's Stone. So what I'm going to do here in this video is show you all some gameplay of these things from the first Harry Potter video game, which I played a ton of as a kid and was, strangely enough, more of an adaptation of the book than it was of the movie. So for the midnight duel, this actually isn't in the game either, but Malfoy challenges Harry to a duel at midnight. So he and Ron, along with Hermione and Neville, are out of bed after hours, and that's when they stumble upon Fluffy for the first time. In the movie, it's framed like the kids just don't really know where they're going because the stairs change, but then they just walk through a door that isn't marked 3rd floor or anything, and they kind of just run inside because of Mrs. Norris. Weird, if the 3rd floor had the danger of death around it, you'd think there would be some sort of sign or postage telling you that this is the door not to open. I'm starting to think that, maybe Hogwarts isn't the safest place. No, that can't be. I'm being silly. The second missing sequence is probably the biggest change from the book to the movie, and that's delivering Norbert to Charlie. The omission of this scene had this domino effect on the rest of the franchise to the point that Charlie Weasley isn't even in the movies, save for this one tiny picture of him. So in this movie, Ron talks about his brother and how he works with dragons. Hagrid gets the dragon Norbert from a stranger in a bar. Great idea, Hagrid. And he can't keep it because, well, Norbert's a dragon. So Harry and Hermione have to sneak up to the astronomy tower to meet up with Charlie so that way he can take Norbert off their hands. Again, I can see why this was cut out from the first movie when a line of dialogue from Hagrid explains where Norbert went, but this is probably the key scene from the first book that this new adaptation will have to do properly, and hopefully they'll keep Charlie Weasley in the story this time. The third change is how there was actually 2 additional obstacles in the way before they could continue on to the Sorcerer's Stone. One of them, the movie just skips right over. Hagrid gifts Harry a flute, which he then uses to put Fluffy to sleep. In the movie, an enchanted harp already has Fluffy asleep until it magically stops playing, although there is a scene with Hagrid playing a flute, which was a nice nod to the book. The second obstacle involved these potions. You have to guess the right one in order to walk through these flames, and if you guess wrong, you die. It's not exactly like this in the book, but it is the reason why only Harry goes on to confront Quirrell, which means that unfortunately, we will not be getting another iteration of this scene.
Not me, not Hermione, you!
So now let's talk about the performances and the actors in general. The cast ranges from spot-on book descriptions to just really good actors who signed on to play the roles. And that's kind of the same for every movie for the adult side characters. As for all the child actors, I mean, I don't really know how to give any of them criticism. I've been watching these movies and I've seen them so many times that I can't even see any of this as acting. I've heard people call some of their scenes from these early movies a little off or strange, but I just think I've heard these lines and seen these films so many times that it doesn't really faze me. But I think easily out of the Golden Trio, Emma Watson really steals the show in this film. She's got the most iconic lines of the movie, besides Ron's speech at the end, and the movie itself really gives her a much bigger role than was in the book. Hermione is really just a side character in the book until after Halloween, when Harry and Ron fully decide to become friends with her. So I'm really interested to see how that is handled when it comes to the show, because I feel like a lot of people forget that the Golden Trio wasn't really formed until like 3/4 of the way through the first book. This movie made it seem like it was the 3 of them as fast friends much earlier, and in doing so, the character of Neville really gets sidelined in this movie, even though he still probably has a bigger role than any of the other school-aged actors. All the adult actors are fantastic. Maggie Smith as McGonagall is going to be really hard to replace, and while roles like Dumbledore have been played by many people, roles like Snape are going to be really hard to recast. Alright, let's talk about it. Papa Esidu as Snape is very clearly a controversial choice. When the casting was officially announced, HBO turned off the comments on every platform because they knew it would be controversial. Therefore, it got people talking about the show, and I guess all press is good press. Now, I haven't seen this guy in anything, so I'm largely gonna hold out my judgment until I see him at least in costume, but my gut instinct tells me this is a horrible decision. A lot of people first turn to the flashback in book 5 of James bullying Snape, and that's certainly a bridge they're gonna have to cross when they get there. But what about Harry in the very first book? Snape is the perceived villain of this first story, and continues to be a secondary antagonist for a while afterwards. And if they are going book accurate to Snape's personality, he's gonna be a lot less forgiving than even Alan Rickman's iteration was. So Harry goes to Hogwarts, sees the only black professor, and goes, there's something about this guy that I don't like. And I'm not even sure how they're gonna frame it otherwise, because Harry pretty immediately doesn't like Snape. When kids go to Professor McGonagall and tell her that Snape is trying to steal something, she's just gonna be like,
You know what you two are? You're little racists.
We all knew that with this new show there was going to be some race swaps, like 95% of the characters in Harry Potter are white, and they weren't going to do that again, so this was to be expected, but to change a character like Snape that has pretty massive story and social implications just doesn't seem like a great idea to me at all. So this first movie had a lot to do in terms of setting up the world, the characters, the magic itself, to the point that the overarching plot involving the stone really takes place in the background of this movie. We don't even hear the stone mentioned until over an hour and 40 minutes into this 2.5-hour film. Sure, there's been plenty of setup beforehand with seeing the stone in the vault, the break-in at Gringotts, Fluffy guarding the trapdoor, but again, all of this stuff kind of happens in the background of introducing different characters and the world itself. This was a pretty huge task to try and achieve in this singular movie, but I think it ultimately succeeded. So many movies nowadays get caught up with trying to set up the world or franchise that the story suffers from it. Yet the Sorcerer's Stone somehow manages to balance all these aspects and even throw in a ton of extra stuff like Quidditch, which was far and away the toughest part of the game as a kid. In fact, I'm not even sure I can do it today. So in terms of an adaptation, Sorcerer's/Philosopher's Stone is really great in every way. The story takes a little while to get going, but the trade-off is being introduced to a whole lot of different aspects in this world. The larger wizarding world and towns, Quidditch, Hogwarts classes and spells, and if you allow yourself to get sucked into this world, then the plot will be there to pull you in even further. It's incredibly hard for me to try and rank these films objectively, so what I'm gonna do is give them a scaled ranking with the franchise itself. So my favorite movie will get a 10, and my least favorite movie will probably land somewhere in like the 6 or 7s. That's the thing with Harry Potter movies. Just about everybody you talk to can have a different favorite movie, and I think that's great. So the Sorcerer's Stone gets a very solid 8.5 out of 10. So I know that I just said everybody has their favorite Harry Potter story, and while that's true, I feel like Chamber of Secrets is really the black sheep of the Harry Potter franchise. While it's tough to call things grounded in fantasy, but especially in Harry Potter, the first movie had some stakes to it for sure, but it felt relatively small scale. Chamber of Secrets, on the other hand, feels much bigger in scale compared to most other Harry Potter stories. This was the point where Harry Potter was still a full-on children's book. Sure, there was some spookier elements in this movie compared to the first one, but the children are still able to save the day and everything works out okay. But when you look at the plot of the Chamber of Secrets compared to a lot of the plots of the later stories, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. I think that things are handled far differently in this story because it's the second one, whereas if this exact plot happened during book 6, it would be far darker and the circumstances would be changed drastically. The books themselves scarcely mention the events of the Chamber of Secrets because of how strange they seem as the franchise goes on. Even in terms of just the movies, Chamber of Secrets feels a bit odd. Coming in at 2 hours and 41 minutes, this is the longest Harry Potter movie. Yes, even longer than the movies, whose books were in the 700 to 800 page range. And it's not even because this is the most faithful movie either. There's some stuff added into this movie that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. especially when replacing it could have meant that more stuff from the book could make it in. I think one of the more egregious scenes added into the film is when Harry and Ron take the flying car to Hogwarts, almost get hit by the train, and Harry almost plummets to his death. This scene doesn't really add anything either. It's not called back to later on in the movie, it's just more stakes for the heck of it. Now personally, I have a bit of a soft spot for Chamber of Secrets. It's not a bad story by any means. I think both the book and the movie are fine additions to the franchise, but what really makes Chamber of Secrets special to me is the video game. There's this trailer for the game that shows Harry, Ron, and Hermione over a pit of lava, jumping around until Ron's the one that almost plummets to his death. Now, if you've seen this, you probably think this is absolutely ridiculous, and thinking about it now, yes, it is. But back in the day when I first saw this, I didn't really think anything was too out of place. I figured this was just another adventure that the trio went on that wasn't in the books or movies. Although, strangely, it's also not in the game either, so in what strange universe does this pit of lava take place in? But it's really this story that Harry Potter cements itself as a mystery series. Now, mystery isn't usually a genre that you hear associated with Harry Potter, at least not casually, but each and every story is a mystery just disguised as an adventure fantasy. In the first movie, who's trying to steal what out of this vault? Why does Snape want the stone? And in classic fashion, boom, there's a twist villain at the end. In the Chamber of Secrets, the mystery is who opened the Chamber of Secrets and who is the heir of Slytherin. Because the world is all set up from the first story, the movie can actually focus on the plot itself. The trio gets together and discuss the possibility of Malfoy being the heir because he's their schoolyard bully, and that only makes sense, only to realize, okay, Malfoy isn't nearly smart enough to do all of this, so their attention turns to the past, and it's revealed that Hagrid was expelled because he might have been the one to open the chamber 50 years ago. They even get help from this cool Tom Marvolo Riddle guy. So as Hagrid becomes the main suspect and as more victims come to light, he's taken away, but more people are attacked. So tension doesn't really shift because there's nobody left to blame. Wait a minute. Tom? Bunch of random letters that make up the letters to Voldemort Riddle? No way, it can't be. I think one of the main reasons why this one stands out amongst all the other stories is just how convenient everything is. If the monster from the chamber looks at you, then you die. But luckily, everybody who sees it doesn't look it directly in the eyes, so Hogwarts still somehow maintains its safe title. Although, I'm definitely starting to think that Hogwarts might not actually be so safe. This story threatens the end of Hogwarts completely, and the stakes never quite go back to this over the course of the story, even when there becomes literal deaths and Hogwarts becomes the location of a war for wizard kind. This movie also introduces us to one of the greatest wizards of all time, and that's Gilderoy Lockhart, played brilliantly by Kenneth Branagh. The more I watch this movie as I grow up, the more I realize just how much fun Kenneth had playing Lockhart. This character gets all the praise and recognition and deserves none of it, which is a really funny aspect of the story. But, seriously, how was this guy even hired? Dumbledore either knew this guy was a fraud and still hired him, or didn't know. So either way, he just seems like an idiot. When Ginny gets taken into the chamber at the end of the story, they all egg on Lockhart to go and get her, even though they know he won't be able to do it. So, what was their plan afterwards? They didn't follow the kids down there, they were just willing to sacrifice Ginny Weasley as a way to out Lockhart? None of this makes a whole lot of sense to me. Lockhart introduces the dueling club, which is a fairly confusing scene in the movies. First off, it introduces Harry's first on-screen spell that he casts. Yes, that's right, look it up, he doesn't cast a single spell throughout the entire first movie, but when he's clearly speaking Parseltongue and it's very obviously from the audience perspective, a different language, the next scene, Harry's like, what? I wasn't talking in a different language. It creates some separation that comes with adaptation. In the book, we see everything in this scene from Harry's point of view. So when Ron and Hermione tell him that he spoke a different language, he and the reader are a bit confused. This is something that the game's version actually depicted a bit better, and it's something that the show should probably improve on. Also, they should have a nod to this film and have a cameraman visible in this shot. Now, as far as things that were cut out from the book, there's actually not a whole lot. They could definitely start the show off like they started off the games with all the de-gnoming at the Burrow, and I'm sure they will do that, but really the only other big plot that was taken out was Nearly Headless Nick's Death Day party, which is like a birthday, but for, death. There's also a bit more Quidditch and a bit more between Harry and Lockhart, all stuff I'm sure we're going to be able to see with the additional time in the show. But Chamber of Secrets holds a pretty special spot in terms of the movies because it's the last one that has a primarily orangey color palette. There's all sorts of memes out there about how different the first two films are compared to the rest of them, and I'll certainly get there, but Chamber of Secrets definitely marks the end of the children's book era of Harry Potter, for better or worse. So I'm gonna give Chamber of Secrets a 7.5 out of 10. So now we move on to what is generally considered one of, if not the best Harry Potter movie, and that's Prisoner of Azkaban. This movie was also the first to mark some pretty big changes, a new color palette, a more cohesive design for Hogwarts that stretches through the rest of the movies, concrete designs for each person's wand for merchandising purposes, and a new director. Let's see, who was this here? Wait a minute. Alfonso Cuarón? To this day, it really shocks me that this guy made a Harry Potter movie. Oscar-winning director Alfonso Cuarón made a artsy Harry Potter film, and it really set the precedent for what this series was going forward. Again, for better or worse. This movie did away with the orange color palette and went with blue instead, and for this story, it really worked. And that's because Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is a horror movie. Not to brag or anything, but I remember being the only kid in my 3rd grade class who was allowed to go and see this movie in theaters because of how scary it was. And there's a lot of legitimate horror elements in this movie. The Dementors and their introductory scene still give me a bit of chills, and I distinctly remember the first time I watched this and how freaked out I was, which means maybe I shouldn't have gone to go see this movie in theaters, but I did, and now I run a horror movie themed YouTube channel, so thanks a lot, Mom. But even in the beginning, with shots of the playground when Harry runs away, the Grim, the werewolf, this movie, if it weren't for the Harry Potter title, surely would have gotten a PG-13 rating, but this is also the origin of why I love horror and monsters, and werewolves specifically, so much. It's all due to Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So for that reason, you can probably surmise that I hold a pretty high opinion of this movie. Sure, there's all the things that I mentioned, but this is also the movie that felt the most alive when it comes to the wizarding world. The Harry Potter movies and stories have always had to balance the storytelling with world building because there's so much of both, and while the first two movies balance them well, I think this is just the perfect example of how this world and this story combine so well together. Part of that is because this story has much smaller stakes than both of the previous movies, probably combined. This is the only story in the entire series where Voldemort isn't the villain. Sure, he's in the background orchestrating things, but he doesn't make a physical appearance and isn't there to ruin Harry's education in the spring. Because of this smaller scale story, we're able to identify more with Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and the rest of the supporting cast, both new and returning. Namely, Professor Lupin. Lupin takes the crown as my all-time favorite Harry Potter character, yes, because he's the werewolf, but also because he's the only competent Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher throughout the entire series. Even in the books, the characters noticeably like going to Defense Against the Dark Arts class far more than they ever had, or ever will. Towards the end of the book, when Harry is talking about all his final exams, he mentions how Lupin set up an obstacle course for them to run through and how people really enjoyed it. And if anything, that's the most similar thing that we ever hear of in the books that we see in the games, even if the games ramp it up like 10 notches. The cinematography of this movie also takes a noticeable upgrade. There's lots of shots going through windows or glass, even reversing the shot in a mirror in Defense Against the Dark Arts class. There's this long shot of Harry and Arthur talking about Sirius Black that particularly stands out to me, especially with everything going on in the background. That makes subsequent watches all the more enjoyable when you notice these things. There's also a lot of wide shots in this movie. It makes you feel like you're a bystander in these situations, like you're a student at Hogwarts or with them in the Shrieking Shack. And even just in terms of cinema itself, I think this movie did a lot to making me love movies and want to learn more about them. Like I said, this movie really set the precedent as to how everything in this world looks from here on out. Hagrid's hut is always at the bottom of this hill from now on. The Clock Tower Courtyard makes several more appearances, as well as a lot of the other locations introduced in this film. The big new class introduced this time around is Divination, taught by Professor Trelawney, played once again brilliantly by Emma Thompson, as this weirdo professor teaching a magic that isn't all that accurate. Or is it? But seeing new classes and professors is again one of the big draws of this series and franchise. As the kids get older, it only makes sense that they would go to new classes and meet new teachers, and seeing how all of that ties back into the overall plot actually works very well in this movie, better than maybe any of the other movies and new classes introduced. The central mystery of this movie is all about Sirius Black and why he wants to kill Harry. At the start of the film, Harry has no idea why this strange, deranged man would have escaped prison to go after him, but he eventually learns about his ties to him and how Sirius was friends with James and Lily and is even Harry's godfather. This leads to an infamous scene where people criticize Daniel Radcliffe's acting, but again, I've seen this movie so many times and from such a young age that this doesn't even come across as bad to me, and it very well may be, but I just can't see it that way. I don't see it as good either, I want to make that clarification. I just see it for what it is and what this scene does, and honestly, I kind of wish I saw all movies this way. But as the story goes on, we learn that this isn't all that true, in the scene that I believe to be the best scene in all of the Harry Potter movies. If you ask people if there's a movie where David Thewlis, Gary Oldman, Timothy Spall, and Alan Rickman all share the same screen, a lot of non-Harry Potter fans might tell you no. That's a crazy lineup of actors, they definitely never share the screen together, but for all these legendary British actors to have actually shared a screen, and for that to be in Harry Potter, just proves how big of a deal these movies really were. All of these roles are relatively small parts, and yet we get some of the best performances in the entire series through this one scene. I still remember watching this scene for the first time, and having not read this book yet, I felt an immense betrayal when Lupin helped Sirius up from the ground, and the movie does this on purpose, because in the book, it wasn't like this. And this is where I'm really gonna give a pretty polarizing opinion when I say this, but this scene is far better in the movie than it is in the book. In the book, Lupin pieces together that Sirius is innocent in this very moment, whereas in the movie, we sort of get this misdirect in thinking that Lupin is evil along with Sirius. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are so angry in this scene, and the whole time, Lupin and Sirius in the book are saying, no, guys, it's not what you think. But in the movie, it doesn't play out that way. In the movie, we really have no idea what is going on, and the scene just kind of one-ups itself every chance it gets. Lupin is a bad guy? Oh my god, Snape is here now? What's he doing here? Oh god, Harry cast a spell at Snape now? Oh, wait a minute, that's not Snape. Now Ron's rat is actually a man in disguise, and he has been this whole time? What the hell is going on? It's such a great and intense scene, but oddly enough, it's also one of the worst adapted scenes in the film. Yes, I said I liked this version better, but the entire conversation around Marauders, how Lupin and Sirius were friends with James, how they created the map, how they're animagi because of Lupin, it's all absent here. So if you watch this movie, you'd still have no idea who Moony, Padfoot, and Prongs are, yet the rest of the movies just kind of treat it like there was the reveal here. But the story also introduces an incredibly tricky plot device, and that's, of course, time travel. Hermione has been given a time turner by Professor McGonagall in order to attend more classes. And the movie does a good job at calling attention to this, but this is the main aspect of this movie where I go, oh, right, yeah, this was still a children's story. J.K. Rowling wanted to write some time travel story, but didn't think out the larger implications of what this could mean for the wizarding world, so much like the Chamber of Secrets' entire plot, time turners are just never mentioned again in the movies after this, even though they would have been incredibly handy to have. There's some more explanation for this, but I'll get to that in another video when I talk about Order of the Phoenix. But for this story, time travel adds quite a bit. In terms of the pacing of the movie, it's only a little over an hour before it seems like we're in the third act. Buckbeak is killed, Ron gets taken by the Grim, the Shrieking Shack scene happens, and we get the werewolf and Dementor scenes. It kinda seems like the movie would be over after this, but then we get to relive all of this again, but with Harry and Hermione going through it all. They actually save Buckbeak past Harry twice, and we finally get to see how powerful of a wizard Harry actually is. In the movies, up to this point, he's kind of been saved by both Hermione and Ron's knowledge. Hermione with the books and potions and lessons that he needs, Ron of his actual experience in this world. But we haven't really seen Harry do anything special. Sure, he took down the basilisk, but that was with a sword. We saw him kill a professor, but that was with his hands. But seeing him cast a Patronus of this scale at 13 years old, which is already incredibly advanced magic, as Lupin tells us, shows the audience that Harry is actually good at this stuff, and he is special. And I think this is just such a great moment for the protagonist to have, because it advances his own character arc, and shows the audience that he's worthy of being that main character. But other than what I mentioned about the Marauders and the Shrieking Shack, this is another pretty faithful adaptation of the book. There could have been a higher emphasis on Quidditch, since this is the year that Gryffindor actually won the cup, that's entirely absent in the movie, as well as some additional Hagrid scenes and strife between Harry and Ron versus Hermione, but truly, this was the first book of the series where stuff could have been cut out. And I think that they did everything accordingly, with a few misses here and there. And I really think that if the show makes it this far, this is gonna be the story where we're really gonna see how different the two mediums are. Is the show gonna make this third entry darker with a darker color palette just like the movie did? Even if it does, is the cinematography, performances, and effects gonna be nearly as great? Is it gonna be nearly as dark? I feel like comparisons between the first and second stories are gonna be somewhat trivial with the first and second seasons of the show, but this will really be the make it or break it story for the show, because this movie is phenomenal. It's the most loved movie by a majority of people, and it's going to be really hard to capture that lightning in a bottle for a second time. This movie showed us a darker side of the wizarding world. It solidified how Hogwarts looks and feels, showed us that if Harry wasn't a wizard, he'd surely be a quarterback in the NFL, and overall delivered what most people, myself included, consider to be the best Harry Potter movie. So even without a scaled ranking, Prisoner of Azkaban gets a 10 out of 10. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I just wish that Alfonso Cuarón came back for... So with the Goblet of Fire comes the end of the children's book era of Harry Potter stories, and with that comes a number of issues, both with the movie and the book. So just to come right out and say it, The Goblet of Fire is my favorite Harry Potter book, but it's my least favorite Harry Potter movie. Saying that, however, both of them are head-to-toe riddled with issues. So I'll get to address some of those, but this film took a nosedive in quality in a few different ways. For one, the legendary John Williams departed the series, leaving Patrick Doyle in his place. And if you don't know who Patrick Doyle is, then neither do I, because all I can remember him doing was this movie and the box office hit that was Aragon. Alfonso Cuarón was offered the job of directing this movie, but he declined because he wanted to focus on the post-production of Prisoner of Azkaban. And that's great, because it gave us the movie that we got, but I would also kill to see Cuarón's version in some alternate universe out there, of Goblet of Fire. See, this was when the time between movies and shows was still respected heavily, and we got a new iteration of the series every year or so, but this also meant that directors couldn't come back for more. So instead, we got Mike Newell, which is the name of my JV basketball coach in high school. Hi, coach, if you're watching this. But honestly, my JV basketball coach might have done a better job at directing this movie than the actual director did.
The only thing that freaked me out was that I actually didn't know how to do this stuff.
So whenever you hire a director who doesn't care about the source material, you're in for a bit of a whirlwind. Secondly, this was the first book in the series that was absolutely massive, coming in at over 700 pages. So it's a daunting task for sure, but it also meant cutting out a majority of storylines from the book. I know I kind of addressed the differences between the book and the movie for the first three, but I can't even begin to tell you how many differences there are between the Goblet of Fire book and movie. You know how Ron and Hermione are kind of just around in this movie, never really doing anything? Yeah, that's because both of their storylines were cut out entirely. Namely, Hermione, who in the book started Spew, aka the Society for the Promotion of Elvish Welfare, because she learned all about how horrible Dobby and the other house elves are treated and wanted to do something about it, which leads to a whole other plotline with Dobby, who's in this book, Winky, another new house elf, and how all of the wondrous meals are actually made by house elves underneath the dining hall. This is a minor change from the books to the movies, but it's also a trend we see continue with other movie adaptations from here on out. The books became so massive and had so many different plot lines that the movie streamlined them, and in doing so, left out a lot of characters, places, and heart that the books had. Not to mention, this was the first game in the series that really strayed away from being an adaptation of the books, and more so an adaptation of the movie. This meant the character models looked more like their on-screen counterparts, and also meant that any and all charm of this being a more independent project than what was going on from the movies completely fell apart. The games from here on out got worse with each entry, but Goblet of Fire still takes the cake for being the biggest disappointment out of any game I've ever played. So let's get started. Harry, who hasn't had a haircut in well over a year, has a nightmare, but he wakes up at the Weasleys, who also haven't had haircuts in over a year, and goes to the World Cup. We don't get to see that game, or even hear what the outcome was during the entire duration of the movie. The Death Eaters attack, but we don't really see it because Harry gets trampled and knocked out. Yeah, any and all faith about how the Prisoner of Azkaban made Harry a good protagonist is kind of lost with this scene. Even as the story continues, it kind of seems like everybody acting in this movie was told that this was an over-the-top children's animation, because a lot of the performances, particularly from the adults, are so cartoonish that it really sticks out when you compare it to the other movies. And if I had to name someone in particular, I'd single out Michael Gambon. Now, Michael Gambon was our second Dumbledore. I didn't make a big deal out of it during the last movie because that movie didn't make a big deal out of it either. But in this movie, Dumbledore is really an entirely different character. We all know the infamous
"Did you put your name into the Goblet of Fire, Harry?" Dumbledore asked calmly.
Harry! I protest! Harry, you put your name in the Goblet of Fire.
But the reality is, this goes much deeper. Dumbledore is a grumpy old man in this movie. He's not your whimsical, wise mentor like he is in the book or any of the past three movies, and I think a lot of this comes down to the direction from JV basketball coach Mike Newell. Michael Gambon is a great actor, and I'll certainly give him his praise when I talk about his performance in another movie, in another video, but in this movie, the character is just flat out wrong. But it's also not just him. Barty Crouch Sr. is another cartoonish character who has some of the most unintentionally funny lines of the entire series.
Chinese fireball.
Along with that comes Mad-Eye Moody, and I think Brendan Gleeson is also a phenomenal actor, and he of course does his best with what he's given, but sometimes he feels like he's playing two different characters, and not in the way that was intended either. Even with my gripes of this movie, it's also easily the most captivating story of the first 4 books. The Triwizard Cup, a life or death tournament being held at Hogwarts with 3 wizarding schools competing to be the best. Again, a life or death tournament, I don't know, doesn't seem like something that should happen at a school, not to mention how absolutely rigged this tournament actually is. I mean, there's the whole thing with the cup being a portkey, yeah, whatever, I'm not talking about that. How about when Dumbledore and the judges just agree to give Harry second place because he's a good guy? Cedric wins the second task, Harry lost, but they give him second place because I guess he's a Hogwarts student and they have home field advantage. If I was in one of the other schools, I'd be like, what kind of tournament is this? Why did we even come here if you're just gonna give first and second place to your students? Also, what does all this placing actually mean? If Fleur, who was in last place during the maze, had gotten to the cup, does that mean that she wins the whole tournament? Or would this be like Quidditch, and just because she got the cup doesn't mean that she actually wins because she lost the other ones? And there's nothing that explains this more in the book. The whole Triwizard tournament just seems like an incredibly strange thing to begin with. And that leads me to talk about Voldemort's plan in this story, and a lot of this plan isn't in the movie, but regardless, it's an insane plan. So Voldemort needs to get to Harry in order to come back to life, so he corrupts a ministry official in order to bring back the Triwizard tournament, something that hasn't been up and running for decades, so that way he can have one of his followers infiltrate Hogwarts as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, keep an eye on Harry, come up with a lesson plan for the entire year and teach multiple classes, make sure Harry's name gets in the Goblet of Fire so that way he has to compete because of a magically binding contract, whatever that means, and then orchestrate how Harry figures out how to actually compete and win. All the way to the third task, where he has to be the one to grab the trophy so that way he can be teleported away from Hogwarts and give Wormtail the opportunity to help Voldemort return. This just doesn't make any sense. There's a whole variety of times where Harry and Moody are alone together. He couldn't just Petrificus Totalis Harry, shove him into one of these trunks and bring him to Voldemort. Instead, he had to teach for an entire year and then have all of this happen. This is what I mean by this being the last story that was a children's book, because the more you look into it, the less it makes sense, and that is so relevant in the Goblet of Fire in particular. Not to mention, this makes Dumbledore seem like a complete and total dumbass for a second time. He hired Lockhart. Why? Now he hires this imposter Moody and doesn't catch on to it for an entire school year? How? We're told that Dumbledore is the greatest wizard of all time, but he doesn't seem that great to me. But if you don't look too deeply into it, the story here is absolutely incredible. Harry has to compete in the tournament while also navigating his teenage angsty life, and this movie makes a big emphasis on them growing up. The boys having crushes on girls is a big focus of this story. Even some of the shots of this movie focus on this, which kind of feels a bit odd knowing these are supposed to be underage high schoolers. But a lot of this actually comes with a good amount of funny moments, particularly with Ron. He has to dance with McGonagall. He's worried about how awful his school dance uniform is. He's obviously got a crush on Hermione, but won't come right out and say it. And this leads to a really funny moment in the book when Harry first sees all the dates for the ball and how dressed up everybody is. Because in the book, he says something about how Cho is with Cedric, and then Crumb is with some girl Harry had never seen before, because he genuinely didn't recognize Hermione. This also comes with pretty typical teenager issues. Ron gets mad at Harry for putting his name in the Goblet of Fire, and this leads to trouble in paradise and a lot of actual teenage drama and how teenagers handle drama, which is funny to look back on. The tasks are easily the most entertaining portions of the movie, and as many issues that I might have with this movie, I really want to shout out this first dragon task. The tension is built up incredibly well. You get the sense that Harry actually is in immaculate danger, and the first couple minutes of this task orchestrate this very well. As soon as Harry and the dragon have their whole scuffle around Hogwarts, it gets to be a bit much. Like, really? Nobody thought of a plan for this? But this ends all the troubles with Ron and Harry because he realizes, holy shit, this tournament is insane. And this also pretty much ends all the bullying that Harry goes through in the entire movie. The second and third tasks are also pretty cool, but not from a spectator's perspective. I mean, what are all these people supposed to do when they go underwater or go in the maze? It's like seeing the first quarter of a football game and then just turning off the TV until the end of the game. What the hell even happened? But narratively, one of the things I love about the final act in this story is how alone Harry is. I'm not sure if this was intentional of J.K. Rowling or not, but the final act of the Sorcerer's Stone sees Harry, Ron, and Hermione all work together to solve the issue. Chamber of Secrets has Harry and Ron work to solve the issue. Prisoner of Azkaban, it's Harry and Hermione, giving each of the supporting characters their time to shine. But in Goblet of Fire, it's just Harry going after Voldemort by himself, especially when it comes to Cedric's death, which is a real turning point in this franchise. Oddly enough, I don't think this moment carries a lot of weight in the movie, at least like the very scene itself. It kind of just happens and they move on from it. That's one thing I'd like to see different in the show, is to have this moment feel a lot more theatrical and have it actually have a lot of weight behind it, because I don't know, I don't get that vibe from this scene. Maybe I'm not articulating that well enough. But this is when we meet Ralph Fiennes as Lord Voldemort. And Voldemort himself is kind of just an evil villain for the sake of being evil. His motivations are very clearly evilly laid out, but also the older I get, the more ridiculous he is. Like, dude, your mortal enemy is still in high school. You're a 70-year-old man and you can't defeat a 14-year-old? And if you're in high school listening to this video, this probably doesn't sound too off. Everything revolves around you when you're in high school, but even in my late 20s, it feels weird to watch a man have such a beef with a high schooler, and for that high schooler to continuously come out on top. When Harry does get back, we get some of the worst acting, apparently, because I still can't really tell, back to back with some of the best acting, with Amos Diggory learning that his son has died. This is a tragic moment. This scene does have weight to it. We get the reveal of who Moody actually was, but oddly enough, we never see this guy again. Feels like he could tell the Minister of Magic all about Voldemort and how he is indeed coming back. Oh, wait, that's because in the book, a Dementor comes in with the Minister and kills Barty Crouch Jr. The ending of this movie definitely has a solemn vibe to it, like something has certainly changed, but the movie overall, yeah, it's my least favorite because it's absolutely riddled with plot holes, and I just didn't like the direction of Mike Newell. But it's an entertaining movie. I still rewatch it time and time again, so I'll give Goblet of Fire a 7 out of 10. Those are my thoughts on the first 4 Harry Potter movies, some scenes I want to see expanded on in the new series, and the reasons why I love this series so much. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more stuff like this. I've got movies 5 to 8 coming out shortly, so I'll see you all there. Special thanks to my channel members, and I'll see you there in the next one.